Hello all. This is going to be a three-part tutorial on how to do the equivocal space project. The first one is going to be on how to create the design. The second one is on how to adjust the values. And the third one is on how to set it up for a cutting file for the laser. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to go to Illustrator and we're going to create a new file, and I'm going to suggest set it for print. And what we're going to do is we're going to make 4 artboards, and they're going to be 8. Let's go to inches by 10 inches, and we're going to do 4 artboards. So just on the up arrow here. Working in CMYK is fine. Raster effects are 300. Scroll down a little bit, go to more settings. And the one thing we want to do that we want to change is we want the spacing to be 3 inches. And you're going to see why that's important. Set the columns up for 2. And then the arrangement of the artboards, either grid by row or grid by column. But don't do either of these two because it'll take up too much real estate on the computer. So once you do that, just create document. Again, I've set my interface up for, if you go to preference and go to general, and then go to user interface, I've set mine up for this medium gray. Some of you like working darker or lighter, whatever. I like this because this is very close to a 50% gray, and it is relatively neutral for our project. So I would suggest that, but you can do whatever you want. Okay. The other thing is, let's go to the windows and make sure that layers are checked. And then you also want to make sure that swatches are checked. All right. We don't need this right now. But we've got our layers and we've got the swatches checked. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to work in 3 layers. So I'm going to first bring in my 3 different objects. So you have to have a shape of choice, a symbol, and then a letter form. So I'm going to bring in the shape of choice first, which is something I created. So I'm going to go File, and I've made this little cat PNG, and I'm not going to go through how to do that exactly, but I basically took a photo of my cat, and you see I left it as a relatively small JPEG, and the reason I did that is that when I image trace it, it's gonna smooth everything out, which is what I want. If I do it at too high a resolution, it'll bring in all this kind of jagged stuff. So what's nice about saving it as a PNG, it has a neutral or clear background, and I don't have to worry about getting rid of that. So I'm going to go to image trace, I'm going to go silhouettes, and then I have to go expand, and that's going to let me do that, change the color. Now look at this. See how smooth this is? That's really good. That's what we want for our project. We want nice, smooth, easy to cut edges. Okay, so I'm just going to put her in about like this for right now, and I'll make those decisions later. Now I'm going to do a new file, a new layer, and then I'm going to bring in my second object, and so I'm going to go File, Place, and I had found this Coptic cross. It's the Ankh cross. I found it online, and you notice it's a stock vector, and this one was okay to use, but I'm not going to bring all this stuff in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to image trace it. So I'm going to go to the image trace, I'm going to go silhouette. I had on my image trace panel set to ignore white, and that got rid of that background. So you've got to make sure if it doesn't go away, go to your this image trace panel, go to advanced, and then select ignore white, and that'll get rid of that. Okay. Then what I have to do is I have to expand it, so I'm going to go expand. Okay. Now these objects are grouped together, so what I'm going to go do is go object, I'm going to go ungroup. What that does is it allows me to select this and delete it, and then this little part and delete it, and it leaves me with the part I want. Okay, I should probably be changing the opacities as I work. We need the opacities on every object turned down a little bit, both for being able to see and also for being able to flatten the transparency. So I'm going to go back to this layer, and I'm going to turn the opacity down a little bit like that. Okay. Now this, we want to create open form composition, but it looks like this is probably a little too big. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit, and I'm going to have my cat come off the page a little bit, maybe make her a little bit bigger. I'm going to try and kind of replicate what I had done before. So see, maybe bring her up a little bit like that. Okay, and then I'm going to create a third layer, and this is the layer that so I'm going to bring it down here. Doesn't matter what order they're in. This is the layer that I'm going to bring the letter form in. I'm going to go ahead and lock these just to be safe. Make sure I don't bring it in on the wrong layer. And I'm going to use the letter 9, so you can kind of get what I'm going with the meaning here. So I'm going to go to text, and then I'm going to pick just because this works really well, I'm going to pick the Arial black again. Again, you can pick whatever you want, but you want something that's relatively bold. And then I'm going to just make this as big as you can for right now, and I'm going to use the letter 9. Okay, and I'm going to scale it up a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to work. Okay, now what I need to do to edit this is I'm going to go to type, and I'm going to go to create outlines, and then that makes it completely editable, both in scaling and in being able to change its value. Okay, so here I go, change the opacity. All right, so now I'm going to bring this on top. Okay, so again, I want to think about both the positive and the negative space, and this works out pretty well to kind of take up the whole area. One of the things that I kind of liked about the first project I did is that this little opening is kind of nice because it creates areas that we can see the different shapes through. You've got to make sure that each shape is somewhere has ground behind it so we can see its original value. If you don't do that, the project's not going to work. Okay, so this is looking okay. I think in the other one, what I did was I'm going to unlock these so I can move this around. I think I brought the cat down a little bit. And this isn't great. I'm not sure I really like how much negative space is here, so I'm going to probably bring this down a little bit. Again, I can crop the 9. I kind of like the tension of where it goes right up to the borders. Now I can play around with the proportions a little bit by not using using the shift key, and I can change that. So now this is kind of nice because now this creates these nice negative spaces. This guy, maybe I can move over a little bit. I'm just bumping it over with the side arrow, something like that. I want to make sure that there's enough of the upper part of this to get it that it's the cross, but I think it does. The other thing I want to look at is the where the overlap areas are. I see this tiny little thing here. This might be hard to paint, so maybe I'm going to move it over just like this a little bit. It's a little too much weight on this side. You can see I can play around with this and mess around with it, and maybe I'll move this over a little bit more, something like that. That's fine for now. Okay, so what I want to do now is make sure all the three layers are unlocked. I'm going to select the entire composition here, so all three layers are checked, are set, and then I'm going to go Object, and I'm going to go Flatten Transparency. Just say OK, and then the next thing I want to do is go Object, Ungroup, and now that makes each section editable. Okay, so that's how we set it up. I'll come back in a minute and we'll do how we're going to adjust the values. Okay, see you in a bit.